Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to Pen Review with Peter Hahn. I want to share with you a new pen today. This is the Pentel ColorBrush Pen, medium size, and I just wanted to share with mainly my main drawing tools for these first few sessions. And the first one was the Hero Gold Hooded Nib fountain pen, and for this one we have a brush pen to go into, and this is one of my main tools that I like to draw with a lot. And a lot of people that do follow me kind of know me for my dry brushing and all that kind of ink work, and this is the brush pen that I use. Now this one obviously has a gray handle and of course the well, as I'm showing you right now, and a black cap, and please do take note of it. The one that I go for is the color brush pen with the black cap, and there is a version with the transparent cap, which is for a finer thin brush. Now this is a medium sized brush, and this will give you a much more broader range of line variations of thin and thick lines. I'm not really going to diverge much into the technique of dry brushing, but I'm definitely going to talk about just the functionality and how this thing works. So this is the actual box for refills that I like to purchase on jetpens.com. You can buy the individual refills in the plastic sleeves that they come in. However, I like to buy them in bulk like this, just so that I have a lot more access to them in my bags, and I'll just keep a whole bunch just on hand. I do tend to go through quite a bit of these refills, so again, I like to have as many as possible. Now, this is the way they look when you buy them individually, but some people like to ask the main question of how do I actually even refill some of these pens? Can you even do that? And the question is yes, you can. There is a way to actually access it. Now I wish Pentel made the ink individually in bottles, but I'm going to be using this platinum carbon ink just like I have done so far in all of my other reviews, and I'm going to keep that standard for all my fountain pens and brush pens. Now I'm going to show you that there is a way to actually access the handle for the actual refill part of it and fill it up with the ink of your choice. Now you do have to be careful the kind of ink you want to use, which is why I use the platinum carbon ink. It doesn't again dry up on the inside of it and kind of gunk it up, and so you don't want to use any kind of ink that's going to be again not set for fountain pens. So I like to use this one in particular because again it holds it very well. Now using a knife, noticing the little black edge that you have on the refill, you're going to put that knife in between the two sections, and you're going to use it to basically just pull off that little end cap. It does take a bit of go, and a thinner knife will help immensely. Now I'm using a pocket knife, so it's a bit more width to it, but with a give, it will start to pop open, and there it goes. So as you slide the little tube open, you can actually drop a few, drops here and there of the actual ink itself using a funnel or some type of dropper tool, and from there you're ready to go. Just pop it back in, and once you set in the brush again, I'm actually going to shave off a little bit of this black plastic bit that I actually cut off a little bit here, so I'm going to cut that off, and it's still good and fine. That's mainly there just again to hold that cap in place, and as you screw it back on, it'll flow just as easily. A couple quick tests of swipes, and it's good to go. So again, the platinum carbon ink is definitely very good use for this kind of brush pen. I wouldn't recommend any others unless again it's fountain proof ready. So let me do a couple tests on lines and the quality of the ink itself too. Using again the Strathmore paper, this is the sketchbook that I like to use on all my tests, and again trying to hold and maintain a consistent kind of test work for all my pens that I'm using for these reviews. So squeezing the little handle, as you saw, you can push a little bit of ink into the well, and I'm going to do a couple of thin lines. And the basic construction of how this pen works is the harder you squeeze that pen, the more ink is being pushed inside that plastic well. And before you actually hit the brush, you have that kind of clear plastic area, which is kind of a well area where the ink is maintained or held, and the brush kind of soaks from that certain well structure. So you can continue to brush, push your brush pen a bit more and heavier, and it will start to feed off of that well structure. And the more ink you use, it becomes drier and drier, and of course you have to push more ink inside of it. But as you notice, the flow of the ink is pretty good. Steady control, even for rotations and round circles. It moves really nicely. And again, a very smooth pen. I do like this one for the broad variations in line. As you can see, you can go very heavy with it. You can move a little bit quicker and start to get some texture and variations within the strokes. And of course, about brush pens, you really have to have really good pressure control. A light hand will go a long way for this one. And so many of the pens that I like to use do tend to want to use very good pressure control. Heavier hand weights you have to be careful of because you can destroy the ends quite easily. And of course, use a lot of ink. Now, of course, because most people tend to be unsure about how to use brush pens or a little bit confident behind it, when they go into it, they tend to find that it's very, very heavy with the lines, so they kind of avoid that. There are other brush pens that are a little bit heavier in terms of ink flow than others, but this one does maintain a much more drier effect, and there are techniques to get much more dry brush effect out of it. So I'm going to do a water test over here as well too, just to show you the permanence of the ink, and just show you just the water brush, and I'm bringing it out. And this is maybe sat there for maybe about a minute or two, and it's already dried pretty well. It does pick up a little bit of the residue of the ink that's still somewhat drying in the centers, and it does just kind of slightly smudge it just here and there. But many of the thinner strokes are again permanent and not bleeding or smudging drastically. So definitely in terms of permanence on paper, this brush pen again works out very nicely. Now there are other brush pens that are not pigment based or water based inks, and so they will bleed like crazy. So jumping into it, we're going to do a quick demo of a drawing here with the brush pen, and this will probably be about a 20-minute sketch, and I'm going to try to push the speed through as fast as I can. I don't do any kind of laying again with the brush pen. I tend to go straight in and start constructing an idea that I may have had from before, and then from there I just kind of adapt through the drawing. Now this brush pen, again, having a light hand pressure is going to help maintain a nice, clean, and also interesting line variation as well. Using a medium tip, kind of a medium brush, that is, you can still get very thin lines off of this. And some people like to use really thin brush pens to get very fine lines. But again, because if you have a good brush sensitivity and also pressure control, you should be able to get the same kind of line variations of thin and thick. Now, I tend to set up a lot of my drawings with a brush pen with a very thin line, much like I'm doing right now, and then from there, as I start to move through it, I'll start to kick up some of the contrast, push in some of the brush strokes, and take advantage of what the brush pen can actually do for me, which again is give me a huge range of different kinds of actual line work that I can use with the pressure. Now here I'm just kind of constructing a character for you, and again, like I said, I tend to construct from the outside in with this type of drawings. With the brush pen, you know, I don't necessarily approach it like I do a lot of my educational type of drawing sketching, which is all about shapes and constructions, where over here with the brush pen, I tend to go in straight in and basically just start getting all the information from the get-go, and I just kind of build off of each section as I go. And I do have a general idea of mine. I don't have an exact picture, and that's not generally the way I work. I do have an idea, a concept, or possibly an action or a story, but the exact image does change constantly as I'm sketching and drawing through it. So the position of the head now will alter the way I'm going to draw the shoulders. That in turn will alter the way I'm going to draw the arms. So a lot of that stuff is not set permanently in my head just yet. So I tend to just kind of start from one area and expand out as I go. Now this brush pen does have a lot of benefits in terms of its quality. You know, the ink quality is excellent. It's definitely one of the favorite things I love about it. The pigment ink, and again, I wish they did somehow made a bottle version of this so I can use it in different kind of brushes, or even actual just standard brushes themselves too, because I think the ink quality is so nice. It's a really rich dark black. It's permanently sealed, and again, it does a really good dry brush effect. The brush construction itself is fairly well constructed. The brush nylon itself it holds up really nicely. Over use of a couple months, it will start to fray here and there depending upon how heavy your hand pressure is. It does hold the fine point very well in the very beginning, but again, you do have to watch out for that pressure. In terms of the overall construction, again, the nylon is really good compared to a lot of other brush pens. But you may have to clip the edges just a little bit here and there once you start to dust fray it just slightly. The handle construction itself is pretty standard, obviously because it's a refill pack. You're just going to replace it constantly. The well does tend to gunk up a little bit because once this ink dries, when you have a lot of use over it, it does tend to dry up and coagulate just a little bit, so you have a little bit of this kind of clogging effect that does happen. But you can easily flush it out with some warm water, and all you have to do is take it apart, just like you had seen before, by unscrewing the handle of the refill, and just run the well under some warm water, or hot water too, and it'll start to basically pick up the ink, and it will start to flush it out really nicely. Even the brush itself, every maybe once a month, I will flush it out with water just so I can get a clean flow of the ink going. And that's really only the main kind of maintenance that you're going to have to do with it, other than just kind of flushing it out with water every now and again. That's pretty much about it. You do have to be careful of one thing though, is that some of the pressure does build up if you're in high altitude, for instance like in an airplane. If it's a pressurized cabin, it will start to, again, because it's a really sealed, nicely sealed pen, if you pop it open in the pen and you start to use it, it will pretty much just gush ink everywhere. So please be careful about that with any brush pens in general, not just this one. They will tend to leak in high pressure altitudes. So with this one, as I continue to draw, as you notice, I'm still going there with a very thin line. Every now and again, I'll pump some darks here and there. I'm going to do a complete construction of this guy, try to get an overall drawing done as I go into it. In terms of some of the cons that I'm not too favorable of this particular brush pen, I would say it's probably going to be about that maintenance. In terms of construction or looks, it doesn't really bother me. I think it handles it very well. I like the brush a lot. I like the ink a lot. But in terms of the construction, sometimes the the when you start to push the actual handle of the ink pack or the ink handle, the ink flow again does get obstructed, not even just by the clogging nature of it, but sometimes just bad construction. So you might get a brush pen here and there just because of that one particular one that was manufactured where the flow of it just isn't as proper as some other ones you could potentially buy. And that's just based upon luck on which one you do end up picking up on. But it's widely available, which is awesome. You can pretty much find them on any kind of store, Michaels, Blix, any art store will potentially have this one. And of course, if you go to jetpens.com, you can find the refill packs in good quantity. So I would recommend playing with the thinner and finer points just to get a sense of it. Again, it does work really well in terms of getting a finer line and getting good constructions, but later on when you start to see some of the more heavier broad strokes I like to go into, the thinner brush pen doesn't necessarily give me the effect that I really want to go for, which is why I tend to stick with this particular brush pen. The reason why I don't tend to use a lot of other brush pens, which I've used many out there, I will explain more in other reviews because I will review more brush pens in a later period of time, show you some of the differences between what I'm using right now, because I want to go through my main tools at the moment just to give you a sense of the standards of what's out there. So continue enjoying the sketch. We'll let it sit for another 15 minutes, so I'll come back at the very end of it, give you my final thoughts on the sketch and the drawing, and of course about the pen itself, so please enjoy. Okay guys, it's at this point where I'm going to start to show you a little bit more of that dry brush technique that's coming up. In terms of how I'm getting this effect, I'll probably be creating another different kind of tutorial on a different platform to show you a bit more detail as to what I'm actually doing here and how I'm getting this effect. As you notice, I did construct it with a thinner line, start to block in with some push the darks a little bit in different areas to kind of collect different kind of material changes of like the hard Kevlar or plastics or impact, resistant areas of surfacing, going into things like the soft areas of clothing and fabrics. But now I'm starting to really kind of brush in a bit more of that softer texturing effect, going into some of the lighting potentially and showing edges and also making it feel more three-dimensional. This effect that I'm getting with the brush pen is the only brush pen I've been able to use to really get this effect on the fly. And as you notice, I really kind of just jumped in from line to line to effect without stopping or changing anything. It was all done through a series of strokes, knowing how to actually control the pressure, knowing how to play and manipulate the brush tips themselves. And really, this brush pen is the only one that's been able to be so versatile in that factor, where I don't really have to do anything other than just kind of play with the pressure and the brush tips, and it does pretty much handle the way I want to by being able to turn things around here and there in different directions, knowing how to just even just kind of play with the brush over time. It took me about a good 6 months to really start to develop this technique where I can get a really instant brush pen technique with all done through knowing the direction of line and pressure control, where I can get this really nice soft granule effect that almost feels a lot like charcoal in a lot of ways too. And it's great because this dry brush effect now dries permanently, so any kind of water brush, any kind of inks or even colors of watercolor paints I apply on top of this, again, it will not affect the line in any way, and it maintains that dry brush look very, very well. So definitely one of the big benefits I wanted to come up with this part of the demo to show you that the dry brush technique is done mainly through this pen only. I don't switch pens, I don't switch the ink, I don't switch anything else. It's all done through series of strokes, instantaneously done through this brush pen itself. So continue enjoying it. I'll come back at the very last moment and come back and finish off the review. So as we come to the end of the review and the end of the sketch, I just wanted to share with you guys a few last thoughts and comments about the summary of this brush pen. For me, this is pretty much one of my main go-to tools, and much like the fountain pen that I just reviewed previously, this is the one that really gives me a lot of big bang for the buck. Basically, it's not a very expensive pen. The brush pen itself does go for about $8.95 to $10 depending on where you're buying it from. The refills are cheap, and it can also be refilled for certain inks that you may have. It's a very versatile pen. It gives me very strong controls of line, thin and thick variations of dry brush effect instantaneously through the sketch and drawing. It's a very well set ink in terms of permanence behind it. Once you start to sketch into it, again, you can use any sort of mediums on top and it'll hold up very, very nicely. In terms of some of the negatives that come up to it, it'll come up to the maintenance, making sure that you can actually go in there and clean things up a little bit here and there if you're not too lazy about it. And as long as you pretty much maintain your brush pen, it will last you a very long time. The brush nib itself, again, due to pressure, is a big factor of it. And so if you do have a very heavy hand, then I can definitely say that you're probably going to go through a few of these pens, within a year. For me, I can make one of these last for up to 6 months, and I may switch it over just because I just want a fresher brush. So definitely, in terms of a lot of other brush pens that I've used, this is the one I would always go to. A lot of other brush pens out there, I do tend to use for other kinds of effects, and I will review those in the future as well too. But definitely, this is the one I can highly recommend the most out of all of them. This is again the Pentel ColorBrush Pen with the black tip. This is the medium brush tip, and this is one I will always recommend to other people. So in terms of construction, I will probably give it about a 7 out of 10 because of, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing pen. It's a very cheap kind of plastic. The brush, the brush tip itself holds up very nicely, and ink quality is excellent, which is why it kind of holds a higher mark. In terms of overall satisfaction, I can't recommend this one enough. This one is definitely one of those, 10 out of 10s for me. So I can always jump to this brush pen and get all the kind of drawings that I ever want out of this one, whether it's a thin kind of line drawing, quick sketch, or what's a really heavy illustrated version of it, big scale or small scale. This is definitely one of the most versatile and also most pleasing pens to draw with. It gives me a really steady control of the line, and it flows really nicely. So again, the Pentel ColorBrush Pen. I'll give you a few shots up close, just to kind of leave off on the video, and just to get an up close view as to what you're seeing. Again, the black cap, you can see the middle part of the pen itself is the clear plastic tip. The pen does hold up a nice fine point and gives you a very, very nice line quality, even based upon a medium tip. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Please come and join me for the next one. I'll probably jump into other sorts of brush pens. Thanks.